Hey, it's Sunday, November 9th, I believe, 2024. On my way to do my weekly shopping. It's Sunday night, and go Sunday night and do my thing. I don't know if this camera's set up right, but anyway. All right, so Millennials, Gen X, they got something a little wrong. A little misunderstanding or just incorrect information. Now listen, I get it. I feel bad for anybody who's under 40 years old trying to get a house. Now, it's really expensive. There are no cheap cities. It's probably the advantage that I had is I was able to move to a cheap city. You know, I went from the New York area out here to Phoenix. But anyway, with that said, it's not it wasn't as easy for my generation and our parents' generation as you may think. There was a lot of TV shows that were based on the housing problems back then, in the 70s, the 80s, and even the 90s. I mean, there were TV shows that were based on it. Bosom Buddies, look it up. Bosom Buddies was in, I believe, the 70s. I remember watching that as a little kid. And it's basically, it's weird because the show starts out with their apartment getting hit by a wrecking ball, but they had to dress like women to go live with women, and I guess this apartment building that was only for women. That was the other thing too, is all these shows from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Millennials and Gen X think that like back then you're in your 20s, you're able to buy a house and live by your own, on your own. It's just not true. So Bosom Buddies, you know, they had to dress like women to live in a women apartment. What's the other one? Oscar Madison, The Odd Couple. You know, dude gets kicked out of his house, working dude. I think that was the 70s too. He couldn't live on his own. He had to go live with his on his own. He had to go live with his buddy. Oh man, it was Oscar Madison and I can't remember. It's like real old guy's kind of name, but they had to live together. And then there's everybody's favorite show, The Golden Girls. You know, they were older. They should all had pensions, and you know, they should have been really fine off, but no, they all had to live together. A bunch of old women. I think they all lived together, or a couple of them lived together. Three's Company, another, you know, 70s, 80s show. Jack had to pretend he was gay because they had a rule about guys living with women. And there's two girls, and Jack was a third. They lived in an apartment, and yeah, so there's that show. You know, you had all these shows back then that were just about like housing problems and people living together. I mean, hell, look at the Jeffersons. You know, they were rich, and they still lived in an apartment. I mean, it was either Chicago or New York, I forget, but they had to live in an apartment. And then hell, the A-Team. Oh no, Friends. Look at Friends. They're all in their 20s and probably 30s, and they all had to live together. I was going to say the A-Team just because I was going to make a joke. Come on, dude. Not supposed to do that in an intersection. The A-Team, I think they were homeless. Does anybody ever remember any part of the A-Team where they talked about where they lived? So I think they were just like homeless dudes that lived in a van and drove around. You know? My own story. I grew up in the New York area, in New Jersey. And my mom started charging me $500 a month rent when I was 17 or 18, probably 18. And I said, screw that. So I moved in with my friends. I lived with Frank, Chris, and Mark. There was four of us lived in a house, a rented house. And our other group of friends we hung out with, they lived in a farmhouse. There was like 8 of them that lived in the farmhouse. So that's how I lived until I moved to California. So I left New Jersey, went to California, where I lived with Frankie, Charlie, and some other dude. So there's 4 of us that lived in that house. And it wasn't until I moved to Arizona, and back then, you know, I moved to Arizona in 2006, 2007. It was actually pretty cheap out here. It's not anymore. But yeah, I got an apartment out here, and it was the first time ever in my life that I lived alone. And you know, I've had a couple girlfriends since that, Yeah, no, I got lucky after the big crash in 2008. A couple years after that, in 2014, I saw the prices starting to creep up. I had a job I had for a few years, had a 401k. I took a loan out and put a down payment on a house. Almost 2 years after that, 2016, 2017, everything went up. So I lucked out. Wasn't skill, wasn't anything like that. I just happened to buy the house at the right time. But I was 40 years old before I could buy a house, and I've always been employed with a very good. I only had 2 jobs in my life, and they both paid very well. And I wasn't able to get a house until I was 40. Oh, you know what other show from the 70s that had housing stuff? All in the Family. Archie Bunker and Edith Bunker, they had Meathead and his daughter, I forget her name, but they had to live at home because they couldn't afford a house. You know, I think Meathead was like a hippie dude, so he probably didn't work anyway. But yeah, so this whole idea that, oh my God, housing is so expensive now. You know, older people, they were able to buy houses and live great when they're in their 20s. It's just not true. It wasn't like that. It never was like that. I don't know who's feeding that idea, but that was never reality. Just do some research and look at it. And these pictures of families where they says one guy had one job and, you know, 3 kids and the wife didn't work and he was able to support all that. That's magazine cover, you know, pictures that were staged. That wasn't real. Hell, my dad used to work all kinds of overtime. He would fall asleep because he worked 2 or 3 different jobs. My mom was a secretary when she wasn't in the hospital and sick. So this whole idea that things were awesome back then, man, they weren't. They sucked. They really, really sucked back in the 70s and 80s. Really bad. So anyway, getting to the store now. Gonna get some groceries. Gonna get some greens. Gotta try to lose some weight. And cheers.